Welcome, everyone. Looks like we have we're a little bit light on attendance this morning, but I'm sure people will fill in. Mayor Buck, it looks like you're presenting this morning for the JPAC piece, so take it away.
Good morning, everyone. Yes. Do we take roll at this meeting? Or no, we just gonna jump right in. No, okay, okay. All right. Yeah, so our first item on the agenda this morning is just an update on the JPAC agenda. And at our last meeting, we've been talking about the regional flexible fund allocation, deciding what projects we're really deciding what projects are going to be moved forward to right now, which is now the public comment period. And I think they're going to talk about that here in a little bit as well. But now a group of projects has been advanced by JPAC, I think unanimously, to this public comment period. So of interest for us here in Clackamas County, kind of the Clackamas County project that has, advanced is the Sunrise corridor project. And there's kind of we got well, as I see it, you've got like kind of three main projects that have moved forward: the Sunrise corridor, the one in each county, this 82nd Avenue project, and then this TV highway project. And then there's two other projects that there was a little bit more debate on, but have moved forward to the comment period, and that's some money allocated to the Burnside Bridge project. They're rebuilding the Burnside Bridge, and then to the streetcar project in Portland. There, what's it so early in the morning? I'm sorry. What's the name of the that area?
Montgomery Park.
Montgomery Park, yeah, Montgomery Park streetcar project. And so there's a little bit more debate on, at least there was a little bit more debate around the JPAC table around those two projects, but nevertheless, all five have kind of advanced forward. So that is where we're at. And at JPAC tomorrow, we have time set on the agenda just to hear public comment on those on that proposed bond set. And I think some of the questions around it had to do with what projects are ready to go right now and are going to really benefit from these funds if they come in, and what projects are kind of tied to other federal funding, which is, like right now everything's kind of tied up and not moving. And if funds are allocated to projects that don't then receive their matching funds, are they going to be able to get off the ground? And what happens to these bond funds? I mean, so those are a lot of some of the questions. I mean, all the projects are good, um, projects that have been well vetted, but a lot of the questions have to do with the timing. So, yes, all right. So that's the JPAC update. Questions? Any questions? Comments? Or should we just jump in?
Joe,
Um,
I have
Yes.
noticed that now that we're in the comment period, Clackamas County has put out some information on social media to try to encourage people to comment. And my observation of some of the comments that came in on the Nextdoor platform regarding the Sunrise Gateway is that over the years where some county commissioners have presented a scenario that Metro is the devil, that constituents have picked up on that. And rather than understanding this as a project of the county where Metro is going to provide funding that the county requests, people are perceiving this as Metro moving into the county, and they don't want Metro in our county. And why is Metro forcing its way in? So that is a public perception that will have to be overcome in order to get more positive feedback on this project. And it's very unfortunate that is how the public, a segment of the public perceives this. But be aware. And I don't know who on county staff is responding to some of these comments, but they're doing an effective job of helping to interpret this to the public and helping people have a better understanding. But I know that's a platform where you get a lot of trolling and a lot of negativity. And so whoever on staff is responding to those comments, boy, I support you in your efforts, because I've had to do that too.
Thank you, Mayor Melch. Yeah, it's a good point. I had to get off the Nextdoor altogether. Just too negative. Mayor O'Dell.
Yeah, I just want to kind of segue on Mayor Milch's comments. Nextdoor has a certain dynamic of people that go on it, and there's other platforms that are more popular. So sometimes I've heard historically people rely as Nextdoor as that pinpoint of what the environment is. And statistically, Nextdoor is not the most welcoming social media platform. I think we need to be on it. I agree that that messaging should be there, but we just have to make sure we don't, that messaging is active in the other platforms. That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor. Commissioner Samus.
Appreciate that heads up, Mayor Milch. I'll have our staff look into that and see if we can't get to better understand where that's coming from. I have not heard that, actually. I only know of one particular person or maybe small group of people that are, pretty well vested in the corner to some degree, or the corridor that is to some degree. But in reality, if we're going to move this project forward, there's going to be some, give and take. I think there's probably going to be, in my opinion, and amongst a lot of us that are on that committee and work in that corridor, there's far more upside than there is anything else. It's just really getting the funding, which has not been identified for the entire project. I do have a question for, anyone who can answer this. And that is that the day after JPAC or the day of JPAC approving, the public comment period for these 5 projects, including the Burnside Bridge, there was a press release of sorts, or a news article regarding the delay in funding or with regard to the Burnside Bridge. And I don't know if anyone knows any more about that. I do know that I communicated with a few of the Metro, or a couple of the Metro councilors about that. And don't know if we have any more intel on that. Is that project in jeopardy? And does it bring us all down? Because as some of you may know, thank you, Mayor Milch, for your testimony that morning. But if money is transferred essentially from step 2 into step 1 to build those 5 projects, we had the big 3 and they got expanded to 5. But my concern is that we would lose our eligibility or likelihood maybe of winning perhaps any projects in Clackamas, one of those being in Gladstone. So we'll talk about that more a little bit later, but I just don't know if anyone has a heads up on that Multnomah County Burnside Bridge funding issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Savis. Councilor Lewis,
Yeah, sure. I'll start. And there are some staff from Metro obviously on the call. The Metro Council, we did discuss the press release and the timing of it in particular, coming immediately after we made a decision. Does not feel like conversation in good faith and a true partnership. That said, it's about a year delay, and when you look at the kind of funding we're talking about, it's a once every kind of 8 to 10 year, 6 to 9 year funding opportunity. So it doesn't make it ineligible. In terms of the ripe use of the funds we have for RUFA, I do think that they are most appropriate for projects like the scale of the other 4 projects, because the Burnside Bridge is technically like a mega project. They will be able to go after the kinds of federal dollars that, despite how big and complicated Sunrise is, the feds will never pay attention to it. But Burnside Bridge is in the same funding scenarios at the federal level as the Interstate I-5 bridge. So I do have concerns that, yes, the opportunity to fund one entire line item of work out of RUFA is significant for the project, but it's just so minuscule compared to the opportunity to really achieve project readiness and construction in every single other instance. So there are concerns. I hope that they are brought forward in comment period. But I do not think that the project would become ineligible just because of a 1-year delay. I think where we've got things to work out are obviously Metro and Multnomah County getting on the same page regarding public narrative and trust and communication.
Yeah, thank you for that, Councilor Lewis. I had not. So this is a press release that Multnomah County put out. Yes. I mean, it is a little
Yeah.
interesting. This was like a kind of a key topic was the timing. And the fact, because was it 5 million or 10 million that kind of ended up as a placeholder allocation for 10
10 million. Yeah.
out of like $1 billion project, so
Yeah.
it's kind of like, well, and for the Sunrise Corridor, the amount of money we get depends on whether or not we're going to be able to go through this the full design phase and NEPA process or not. And so, it would be great. I mean, we'll be able to advance some portion of the design process for Sunrise, but it will need other monies if um, you know. So, but do have Mr. Owens going to be talking about the engagement strategy here for Ruffa after we hear from Ms. Holmquist, who is here this morning to talk to us about the Metro's Community Connector study. So, Allie, good morning. Good to have you here.
Thank you very much. Good morning to you too. And I really appreciate being able to be here this morning. And I'm just trying to pull up my slideshow for you. There we go. Perfect. Okay, great. No, I believe you're seeing my slide deck, and I am here today because I'm hoping to hear your thoughts on the role that's emerging for community connector transit as we begin to gear up identifying opportunity areas. So particularly, I'm hoping to hear from you what outcomes you're hoping to see from the local service area and mobility hub location identification assessments that I'm going to describe in this presentation. So last fall, I provided an introduction to the study, and I heard from this group that it was important to consider what factors are critical to the success of community connectors, thinking about the different levels of access that exist today in different places to transit, thinking about the overlap with intercity transit providers, and also thinking about funding. So I want to talk about how that fed into the work that we've done so far to develop an emerging policy framework and the approach for completing both of the assessments that I'll describe. And then the next touch point that we've proposed is to report back on the outcomes of those assessments and start talking about priorities. And that's also where we'll start talking about implementation tools, which includes funding. So for the work that we did, we first went back to what we heard during the last regional transportation plan process from agency partners and also from our community and business outreach. And we identified 4 key needs themes to look into a little bit closer with some best practices research that had some specific challenges around them. So mobility in lower density areas, where transit typically has more difficulty being successful, thinking about our suburban and exurban areas that both have neighborhoods where people live and local places that they want to get to. We wanted to think about access to jobs, particularly thinking about our industrial centers, and also looking at opportunities for outdoor recreation areas as well. And you'll probably notice a theme that all of these tend to be located at our regional edges. And then one additional theme that was less about geography was thinking about time of day service band needs as well, particularly for shift workers that tend to need service either earlier or later than especially the peak hour for transit. And so we looked at best practices in the region and then also nationally. And so you can see that's what all the pictures are here on the left side of the slide are examples of. And we explored if community connectors could meet these needs, and if so, how they could be implemented to best meet them and what they would need to be successful. So from that, a framework is emerging for how we can use community connectors as a tool for achieving our vision of an accessible transit system that's also frequent, convenient, and affordable. And so our big and fast light rail and rapid bus connects our centers with the most activity, with workhorse buses connecting communities and destinations along arterials. And then so community connectors can then link up with these other services to expand the network further into our suburban areas and employment areas as well. And where we do not have transit today, especially at the edges, they can act as local circulators between neighborhoods and key community places. So what we're looking to do next is apply this framework to identify new community connector opportunity areas on our regional transportation plan vision map, which you can see here on the slide. And we're looking at creating 3 different opportunity categories. So current opportunities, or where we could operate shuttles more near term, areas that are planned for future transit service, but where a temporary shuttle sooner could build ridership for that service that's planned later. And then areas where we anticipate a need for shuttles based on growth in the future. And so to do that, we're asking 3 key questions that are really related and rooted into our regional goals. The first one being, where are we seeing needs, but where transit service is not reaching today? So we're looking at places that are outside of an access shed from our existing network, but what have key community destinations and little clusters of development. And then we're asking within those areas, which of them are transit supportive? So have some density, population density, or major employer draws, or also have equity focused areas where people who rely on transit might have been pushed out of our transit supportive cores based on patterns of gentrification. And then finally, the last question is, what does other regional work and local expertise tell us about markets? Looking at travel demand to think about mode shift opportunities, local and regional plans where work has already been done, and then also partner and community feedback as well. And then the other thing we're doing is that as we're planning for these shuttles that will link to existing transit, including at sites where other transit like bus and MAX are already meeting, it'll be important to ensure that these points have the space and features to make these connections in a convenient and comfortable way. And that includes intercity providers as well, and something we're planning on engaging them in directly. So mobility hubs link not only transit services with each other, but also with first and last mile transportation options and wayfinding. So thinking about walking and bicycling access, but also things like bike lockers and rideshare. They also include stop and community amenities, so coverage and shaded waiting areas, art, and they can even include community gathering spaces that all come together to create vibrant, people-centered places. And so these will vary in scale and function depending on where they're located, but they all contribute to an integrated transportation system. And so we're considering that context and community character to develop an approach that supports implementation in a way that's flexible to address unique needs. And so that really differs from regional hubs, and like the Beaverton Transit Center is already doing today, that bridge the gap between urban and suburban mobility needs. And emerging hubs like the Tualatin Park and Ride, or what we're also really seeing promise in is Happy Valley Shopping Center, that connect local travel modes while supporting suburban employment districts, campuses, and medical centers. And so what we're looking to do is identify hubs where we see that transit connectivity and access connectivity happening today or planned in the future, and thinking about, again, land use, equity and community impact, transit-oriented development potential, and opportunities for public-private partnership. There's some really neat examples in other places that we've seen of partnering with a medical center or even like a Target parking lot in the shopping center to provide spaces for these mini hubs of repurposing some of that parking for the transit and people walking and bicycling to come together. We're also collecting more information on local and community needs, since I mentioned that's feeding into the assessment in a couple different ways. So we're engaging agency partners through advisory committees and also a working group that supports the study. But we're also working this May to have larger workshops where we're going to review the opportunity areas assessment outcomes with local partners. And so that's something that we're preparing to invite staff to right now. As far as public outreach, we have a public survey that's out that we're doing extensive noticing and cross-promoting on. And then we're actually out in community at different tabling events for community and tribal gatherings. And I just want to end with a note that we are one of the many regional transportation plan implementation items that's happening between our last update that wrapped up in 2023 and the next one that's going to be starting this next year. And so your feedback today will help us continue to define that community connector transit framework rooted in our regional goals towards creating recommendations for that 2028 regional transportation plan, which of course guides transportation investments in the region. And then just a quick nod to our website where we have more information. And thank you so much. And Mayor Buck, I will turn it back to you.
Thank you, Allie. It was a great presentation. Folks, if you have any questions, just please raise your hand. We have some time for questions. Allie, so for clarification, so this this great study is going to, the results of it are going to end up in the RTP update. And as a guiding, is there like a connection between this work and any other like specific funding opportunities, or like does the project have to be in this within this, or is this kind of more like a guiding, document?
So yes, we will be recommending some changes to the regional transportation plan. There's a couple different sections that this study can impact. One is the actual zones on the map. We have a few community connectors identified. They're actually from TriMet's service enhancement plans from 2015. And so we want to expand where we have seen since then more opportunities arise. There is also, of course, the actual policies themselves, so we can add some more information on the role that we do see community connectors playing and the important or expressing that we think they're important in the region. But then there is also the project list. And so that gets to more of the funding and the actually, getting things into the ground. Right now, we're approaching this from a strategic perspective. So we're looking at opportunities first that are independent of funding. So we're just looking at where we think the areas in the ground today or in the that are planned in the future have the right recipe for a connector. And then we do want to be looking, when we start getting into tools, at funding opportunities. The challenge is that a lot of the funding sources for transit fund all different types of transit, and we're looking at one specific mode, and there's a lot of work where we talk together about what are the priorities across modes, and that's a better conversation for the RTP.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you very much. Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, Ollie, good to see you. Thanks for your presentation. I have a couple questions and then a comment. So question number one, when you say edges early on in your presentation, you're obviously talking about the edges of the metro boundary, not the county edges, right? That's
correct. We're talking mainly about our metropolitan planning area boundary, because we do have 7, but it would be Metro's boundary, yes.
Okay, and the second question, and then again, I'm going to follow with a comment. The second question is that would you think that the non-funding aspect part of the study would be similar to a level of service study?
I think it's similar. We are looking at what places have the not only need, but do have some level of transit supportiveness. I don't know. I think for level of service, if you were looking at, everywhere in the region specifically, kind of independent of that, it might be a little bit different, but we are taking a look at everywhere that has that certain mix of ingredients and it's a pretty low level of density. But there will be a few areas where there's particularly large lot development or say like certain maybe large uses that might create within a block group like a golf course that could be less ripe for transit funding. And then maybe with a level of service, you might still assume those in there. And that's something that we're not doing. We have some threshold of transit supportive density, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for that. So, you know, many of you may know I've taken a probably a stronger, deeper dive in the transit than ever before, and I'm discovering some significant challenges actually for us that are on the edges. And I've asked for years now, I've asked for, we ought to do a level of service study to examine, you know, where we have transit, where we don't, and what the metrics are, whether it's a quarter mile or half mile. And, you know, I've gotten nowhere. So this comes close. So don't get me wrong. I appreciate that this comes close to that to some degree, but we're not factoring in the commute shed, which goes beyond those edges of the metro boundary, right? There's, at least in Clackamas County, there's over 200,000 people that are, you know, I won't say they're all commuting in, but they live just outside the edges, and you know, some are quite remote. We know that, but you know, TriMet does dip all the way into Estacada, which is pretty far out there. A lot of people don't know that. It's the only rural city, so to speak, that TriMet provides service to, and there's a lot of history there. I don't care so much about the history as much as I do the fact that now with HB 2017 and the STIF dollars, that it appears that because the income level status, not unlike the supportive housing services article that came out a little while ago, that Clackamas County residents might be paying the most and getting the least when it comes to transit. And more significantly, that this quarter mile versus half mile access, I think it's more reasonable, you know, and help me with this. I'd love to hear any thoughts on this, but considering the topography of Clackamas County, even in the area where I live, you know, just south of Milwaukee, and Milwaukee's kind of flat, but Oak Grove is not, nor is Oregon City or Lake Oswego or West Lynn. So, you know, a half mile on a flat area is for anyone who walks, you know, to get access to transit. A half mile is far easier than a quarter mile of hilly roads, right? So using a half mile metric in areas where it's topographically challenged is not actually a very fair or honest means of trying to measure access to transit. I you know, I'm appreciate our providers that are working to make connections that don't have limits to working outside their own boundaries, so to speak, you know, so, you know, kudos to, you know, SMART in Wilsonville, and kudos to Canby Transit, Sandy, South Clackamas Transportation. And, you know, Clackamas County does provide service up to the mountain and also does provide a shuttle. But I just want to just speak to how long, you know, we've been advocating in the area where I live, 26 years now, 25 years, that for a local shuttle or a jitney. And I appreciate the photograph early on that you showed of the Grove Link. And I want everyone to know that the Grove Link preceded HB 2017 and STIF. It's been there a long time, and it had, you know, kudos. I've had many conversations with former Mayor Truax on this. And I understand Right Connections role in that, but I don't know why we cannot get, and it's been so long. And if I need to shake all the trees, I'm going to shake all the trees because it's gone on too long. And with the fastest growing cities in the state, many of them being in Clackamas County, Happy Valley being one of them, and surrounding areas, now is the time to address that, right? Now is the time. I mean, it should have been years ago, but I'm losing. I just want to let you know, sorry for the rant, just kind of losing my patience, but that we're not getting the deal. But I just want you to know that our providers are working together. And but however, I think there's some structural funding challenges that need to be resolved at the state level. I just want you all to know, if anyone has any interest in learning more about that, give me a call. I'm still digging, but I've learned that there are some structural challenges to explain perhaps why we are not seeing the fair amount of funding that we rightfully deserve. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Savis. And here to talk to us about where we're going to get the funding is Mr. Sarah.
Hey, thank you, Mayor. And sorry, I'm not on today. I'm also doing daycare drop-off as we speak. I have a couple comments about Commissioner Savis's points, and wanted to address Ali's great presentation and just say thank you, Ali, for all your work that you've done on this connector study. We really appreciate it. I do just want to flag, and you guys have already identified this, that we are concerned about some of the communication about this and just the concern for funding. You know, we don't want to. I want to make sure that we're not setting expectations that these are going to be achievable without some additional level of funding, because currently there's not a funding source identified to do these. But we want to keep talking about that, and thank you for your work. Commissioner Savis, wanted to address a couple of your comments. I know you and Tom Mills had discussed a level of service study for Clackamas County. I know he's still working on that. I haven't checked with him on that in a little while, so I will do that and follow up with you. I also had an understanding that you were working on something at the county level on that as well, so I'd be interested to hear if there's been any progress on that. We can talk about that offline, but I will check on what Tom Mills has been working on for you for Clackamas County. Also, just want to flag, as always, that TriMet is legally not allowed to provide service outside our TriMet service boundaries. So we appreciate that other providers are able to do that, and that is one of the reasons why we provide funding for the regional coordination program that helps us cross boundaries with our regional service provider partners. I think that's what I've got right now. Commissioner Savis, I would be interested in hearing more about your data that you have on level of service versus what's being paid in Clackamas County. That's an interesting conversation, and I'd just like to hear more about what you know. So I appreciate it, and thank you.
Thank you, John. Ali, as you know, with the STIF, the payroll tax, you know, we've often kind of around this table and others talked about that as a potential, you know, funding source. And I get right now, you know, just evaluating projects and coming to the funding, but you know, at some point, the funding is really a critical part of the conversation. And it seems like there's been some of the challenges are just in definitions, you know, like how transit is defined, and like these shuttles really don't, these community connectors, they don't fit that definition. So is there any kind of could this study kind of address some of those challenges just in the how we define transit to so that there's a more those kind of opportunities than like through programs like the STIF, or that you have to be even you know, a transit authority. So for instance, like a city who's running a shuttle, they say, well, you're not a transit authority. So you're not a transit provider. So we can't give you money, which, you know, is kind of nuts that a city that otherwise like Lake Oswego runs a shuttle, but we couldn't be, you know, receive money from because we're not technically a transit provider. So I don't know.
Oh, sorry. I think there's some opportunities absolutely to start advocating for community connectors. And that's one of the things that we want to achieve with this work and also there are I should also mention, there's some smaller grant programs that we have seen, like ODOT's Innovative Mobility Grant Program that has a number of ways that you can fund pilots to help get some new things off the ground, or they even have a small bucket for operations. If that would, you know, continue in the future, then we could set up a lot more places to be able to go after that money. We're seeing stuff coming, new grant. We don't know the federal landscape anymore, but we saw some, you know, new things coming out of EPA. So sometimes we just also don't know where new funding is going to come from. One thing we've heard from our partners about STIF, though, is that it's a very oversubscribed program already. So one of the ways that we would like to present this work is showing how much more need that there is. And so that and I think this goes to the commissioner's comments about just needing more funding. There's so many things that STIF is already supporting that's really great. And so if we had more STIF, could we do more, or more funding sources like STIF, could we do more things? But I think right now, and John could speak to this even better than I can, there's just a lot of transit need that's competing for these small buckets of money. And so it's just a really hard priorities conversation when we have so much need and so many good service that's competing for the same things. We're trying to just advocate for more. What else could we get if we really could invest more?
Yes. But I guess I bring it up because they are, I mean, raising the stiff is part of the transportation package that's, before our legislators right now. So I feel like if we're not on top of getting the kind of the right framework in place, then we're just going to be having the same conversation about, oh, well, yeah, we could access this money, but the definitions and such. So anyway, that's why I think now is the time. And it seems like, so I guess, I'm sorry, Al, I don't want to press you, but you didn't answer my question. Is this study that you're doing going to address some of those policy gaps?
I can tell you that from the regional plan, we'll definitely be identifying or addressing those policy gaps. I don't know, because we've heard so much from partners about kind of staying out of STIF, if we'll be able to get to anything at the kind of state level. I am going to take that feedback back to the working group though, but I've heard that pretty strongly from the group. So I just don't, to answer you very directly, Mayor, I'm not sure based on the feedback we've heard that there is a larger appetite for that at this time, but I'll take it back.
Okay. Councilor Anderson.
Thanks, Mayor Buck. I hear like these challenges that we have. We're a resource-constrained environment. If already is limited dollars, and the increase that the state proposes would still be a cuts budget for many services funded by the STIF program after all the inflation we've been seeing. I guess with that in mind, it seems like a challenge to me to be providing transit services to areas that are so underdeveloped and like less populated. And so I just wonder, when you're talking with jurisdictions about providing transit services to these underserved areas, is there conversations about those localities then providing the ability to develop around those transit services, or like increasing the development potential of areas that are served by transit?
Thank you. That is a great question. We've been talking a little bit about the recipe for what transit needs to be successful and framing that up, because that's exactly right. Some level of development and population density is really critical to transit being successful. When we get to a future phase, so after we do the opportunity assessment and start talking about priorities, we're going to be developing some tools. And one of the tools that we're going to be developing is a land use plan checklist. And so that will have some guidance for local jurisdictions as they're updating their comprehensive plans to be thinking about how to bolster these areas with land use planning that supports a little bit more of that density, especially at the threshold that we need to see for connectors to be able to make them successful. Also things just like compact development in a context sensitive way, but just like we're seeing in Happy Valley, for instance, being able to have things that are at least closer together and some of that walkable access so that we can support the transit in these areas that have less density, but then can also have some of those elements on just like a smaller scale than we see in places like the central city that supports like high capacity transit.
Okay, I would say not all of us have the luxury of being developing cities at the edges of urban growth boundary like Happy Valley. And for cities that are like ruined suburban sprawl, before we were thinking about all of these things, I think it would be helpful to still have the opportunity to see this expansion of services with like what having that checklist, not just for like what the existing conditions should be, but what cities should do to be able to be considered for programs like this would be really helpful.
Thank you, Councilor Anderson. All right, Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, I really think we ought to have a little brainstorming session to talk about the ins and outs of this. I said I kind of learned a lot, and I think that you'd all be we all benefit if we could actually talk about the structures of all these things and what I'm seeing as structural flaws in the system. So I'll give you an example. STIF funding never would have been included, as I'm learning, never would have happened in HB 2017 had it not been for the promise that STIF funds would be dedicated to areas that did not have transit, right? And so that's what got it across the finish line. I think there's some folks that advocated for STIF funding to backfill their O&M. And so agencies that provide transit that run leaner and run tighter and efficiently probably have a higher, they're far more effective typically. And I think the stiff now appears that if you look at the flow of funds, that it's not meeting that initial purpose that a lot of us thought. And the rules are rewritten, and the rules were rewritten by people who sat around at this table, the rules committee, that did not factor in the outline areas as much and were more concerned about their bottom line. That's a strong statement. Sorry, but it's true. I didn't say those words. It was said aloud to me. So I get that. But I do want to say that, you know, Ali, you mentioned the words patterns of gentrification, and Councilor Anderson mentioned urban sprawl. You know, the fact that the cost of housing is what it is, this commute shed argument that we ought to be looking greater and grander. I mean, just not even, I mean, I'm talking considering the commute shed from outside the counties, the 3 counties of the Tri-Met region, for example, or not the Tri, but the Tri-County region. But the fact that people are moving farther and farther away and commuting in every day. So urban sprawl is a reality, and is driven by economics, and the economics are so heightened, and I don't see any relief from that we have to factor that in if we're going to meet all these goals, climate, et cetera, and development, and not provide the transit for it, or the transportation connections, whether it's roads or whether it's transit included. I think is a lost opportunity, and we don't look, frankly, you know, if you look at the whole scheme and the strategy and how we all work together, or frankly, we don't work together, it's almost embarrassing as a state, as a region, that we're not more coordinated and we're not more sophisticated in how we approach this. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Savas. So we're going to go to Mayor Bielowski and then Mr. Bashir, and then we've got to wrap it up.
Good
Mayor.
morning. Hey, thank you, Mayor Buck. Thanks for the presentation. One comment I had is when you talk about hubs and emerging hubs and big regional hubs, West Lynn may not have a traditional transit center in the sense, because we're one of the cities that are kind of Tri-Met goes through, and we get service from a few lines, and we're grateful for the additional service that we recently got. But like, we do have a park and ride on Highway 43, and we're doing a lot of exciting work with our Vision project to maybe increase housing on 43 and economic opportunity. But we just don't want to be left out, because the definition of hub is too like restrictive to where you got to be served by multiple lines or have certain requirements. So my only comment for some of us cities, I'm thinking cities kind of like Gladstone or Westland, or other cities where Tri-Met just goes through, you know, don't leave us out from the being able to qualify for certain things because we don't have a traditional transit center. So anyway, that's all. I just wanted to throw that out there. I'm interested and excited to see what happens with this connectivity study.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Bashir.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Ali, for the presentation. As a transit provider and a recipient of STIF, I want to join Commissioner Savas in encouraging those folks that are interested to dig a little deeper than the surface, look into a STIF and how it's structured. I think you'll be surprised. And I would offer that we often in these discussions talk about how important more money is. We're trying to build a road, we're trying to maintain the streets, and the answer is always more funding. I would suggest in this case that increasing the STIF, which in my opinion is a flawed and kind of a dysfunctional program right now, and throwing more and additional funding at it doesn't do anything to address what is being discussed here today. And I've been around this thing long enough to know that I am not going to accept a bag of magic beans, a promise, which is nothing more than a lie deferred, in my opinion, for supporting this type of thing. It is broken. The small providers of Clackamas County recognize that. We've been struggling to right this wrong. And Commissioner's office has been right there with us to help. So I appreciate his help with that. It's not over. It's not nearly over, but I would encourage us, all of us, to look into this. And money is not the answer. I guarantee you it's not the answer. We'll be here, 5 years from now saying if we just had a little bit more money, the small providers and the edges would be, we could better cover those edges. Anyway, I could go into detail, but thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Bashir. This is obviously a topic of much interest to all of us. We appreciate that this study's going on. I think it's an important, first step in this. And so thank you, Allie, for coming here to give us the update. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Now we're gonna move on to the RUFA engagement strategy here with Mr. Owen. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much. Just have a few slides from your packet to highlight for you this morning. If you're looking along in your PDF packet, we will be touching on, for this item, slides 13, I believe it's 13, 14, and 15. So this is an exciting time. Metro has opened up the Regional Flexible Fund Allocation public comment period. We are right in the middle of the public comment period. And so this is a wonderful time, as was already touched on earlier in the meeting. For tomorrow morning's JPAC meeting will be quite a focus on receiving public comment for the entire RUFA program. There are a few ways for folks to submit comments. So page 13 in your packet, this kind of colorful several boxes here helps to explain the reminder that this is a program with a few different pieces inside. So step 1, A1 is the bond. That is the piece that within the county, the Sunrise corridor is mostly a part of. The step 2 piece below it in kind of pinkish color there, pink purple, is the competitive bucket of funding. Those are perhaps the smaller capital projects from around the region. So there are 6 within the county. So we do want to get your direct feedback today on both making sure that you are all thinking of providing testimony. I think it would be most impactful if you think of all the different ways you could provide testimony through the virtual opportunity tomorrow at JPACT, as well as email, phone calls, and taking the survey through Metro's website. So we will come right back to this page because we do want to make sure we have a few questions for you to look for your guidance on step 2 projects. We do also have a website that's been developed by county staff to provide some talking points potentially for the Sunrise testimony. That is part of step 1. So we'll make sure and paste that into the chat. But it's also linked here as Sunrise testimony resources in your packet. For the step 2 bucket of funding, we have in the next page in your packet this kind of snapshot at a high level of how projects all around the region were kind of given scores by the Metro review team and an overall rating. In addition, there's a few columns there to the right: equitable transportation, safe system, climate action, mobility options, thriving economy, and design. So those are kind of pieces that add up to that overall rating and a numeric score. I would note I think yesterday or 2 days ago, the Metro team did provide slightly updated numerics on some of these issues and issued a memo. So there's a few updates for the step 2 piece. And I would say within Clackamas County, None of our step 2 projects changed numerically that you see on the next page in your packet. So those total scores for the Clackamas County projects have remained the same. But the flag here is that some other projects around the region did receive a couple of additional points here or there, and that's explained in a short memo by Metro. So some of those numerics are changing just slightly. So that should be a flag that it's a little bit of a concern in the sense that projects from around Clackamas County did not score quite as well numerically from this exercise as some other projects within Washington and Multnomah County. However, as the Metro team has reiterated, the scoring is just one component. We are now, of course, in the middle of the public comment period. That carries a lot of weight. There's a lot of other factors that go into this decision-making process. The third page in your packet here is just a zoom in on just the projects within Clackamas County that were submitted for step 2 within the regional flex fund allocation. The main takeaway here that I hope you can kind of glean is there are 2 different categories within step 2. There is construction, which is the top 3, and then the bottom 3 there are planning and project development. So those are a little bit different types of projects. The top 3 are asking to construct something, and the bottom 3 are looking for that funding to help them get closer to construction. And so provided here are the 2/3 on the left are kind of the Metro team's evaluation. And then on the right side, I've added just a couple of other columns for things that we should also be considering. The Metro team provided a risk rating, the medium high, medium, or low scoring. I wanted to note there that public comment for all the projects is of course ongoing, so that's to be determined. That'll be wrapping up here at the end of April. So into May, we could theoretically kind of populate that column a little bit with some type of feedback of what was gleaned from the public comment period. And then the amount requested in dollars is shown there from each project. And a quick point that, even just from within our county, we're getting close at 35 million there. We're getting close to the total amount that's expected around the full region. So this program is oversubscribed and is very competitive. So just wanted to kind of make that point for everyone to be reminded of. So I will close down here with just a zoom in on that first page in your packet. And the questions that we do have for you today is we are looking for your guidance here on whether, for example, CTAC, your technical support committee, can be assisted your efforts to look at these 3 questions. Should C4 be looking to submit priorities from within our county? Number 2, how would C4 Metro like to be engaged in that process? Should it be project specific or goals or themes? And then number 3, if staff support is needed from CTAC, your technical group, we have a meeting coming up next on May 1st. And so we are happy to coordinate that effort and be of service. So I will pause there, and then I think Will can handle the TPAC update after.
Thank you, Jeff. All right. Got 3 questions. I already forgot the questions, Jeff. Maybe we can we put them in the chat?
Yes. So yes, the major question here is, would you like, so in the pink purple box here, for step 1, the takeaway is make sure to be considering ways to provide testimony for step 1, and then for step 2, should C4 be submitting priorities from within the subregion? Number 2, how would you like to be engaged? And number 3, would you like the technical group at CTAC to do any extra work or help to kind of frame anything for consideration from within the county?
All right, what do you folks think about that? Commissioner Savis, what do you think?
Well, probably to make it in very few words, yes, yes, and yes. So that's the easy part, but hearing from you all, because, well, certainly the county has one project in that step 2, but Oregon City has a project and Gladstone has a project. And if I'm leaving one out, please jump in there. But As Jeff has mentioned here, it's oversubscribed, which means it's going to be highly competitive. So therefore, how do we best position ourselves? And I guess to some degree, I don't have the full understanding of what those other factors are that are aside from the scoring. And so having some insights and our technical staff help guide us. But I don't want to see us competing against each other. But there again, if there's projects that are more likely to score higher, then maybe we should all get behind them. In the past, regardless of the funding stream, we've always tried to share some of the love or the projects or support for that, so that every part of the county gets something over the years. That's been one strategy, but I'd like to hear some insights and hear from all of you. That's all I have to say. That I do think we ought to be strategic. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner. Councilor Anderson.
No, one of the projects in step 2 is in Milwaukee, and I'm pretty sure it still is the project in Clackamas County, possibly the whole metro region with the most public comment so far. I will say I have a larger fear about us doing mega projects in step 1 that pulls funding away from step 2 projects. And I think as people are sitting around these tables, like I would guard these step 2 dollars really closely, because I think that's more true to what RUFA funds frankly are supposed to be spent on. And I think, especially in this uncertain national environment around large projects, like pouring money into backfilling millions of dollars in these large projects that might sit for the next decade because of a lack of uncertainty, like it does not seem responsible budgeting. I think these small projects are things that we can do really quickly, and they'll benefit our communities. So that's a larger piece, but I would love to have a conversation about all the Clackamas pieces as well in this step 2 project.
Thank you, Councilor Anderson. Yeah, the county staff had put together a really good diagram looking at the projects, like in a scenario where there was money pulled from step 2. What if you were just to allocate the top, scoring projects? It was Clackamas projects that were then at the bottom of that list that seemed to be just based on the scores at risk of being cut. And so that's of great concern to all of us. Councilor Pratt.
Well, I definitely have a concern that of all the ones that rate overall best, only one is not in Portland. But I'm just wondering, on equitable transportation, can you just define for me what that means? Because I'm not sure what went into that consideration.
Thank you for the question. That is a little bit of a hard one. It is determined by Metro in their evaluation, but I think it does reference equity areas that have been determined by Metro through previous processes. So sorry, I don't have a more thorough response for you, but I can. It is basically determined by Metro and their systems.
Thank you, Councilor Pratt. Councilor Lewis.
Sure, I can try and help answer Councilor Pratt's question. So Metro has mapped equity areas, and that map is consistent across all of our programs and departments. And the map takes into account multiple census tract data sets. And basically, if the project that is being considered is in and serves that equity area, that's what gets it a high score. So it's just the metro map being compared to where the project is. It's not about modality or people who may be using that infrastructure who don't live right there, if that's where the equity area is. So that's the equity piece. I also just wanted to remind us of the guidelines that we cannot sub-allocate. So the region has to come to a consensus. We don't get to say there's 3 counties, let's split this money 3-way. We don't get to say we are, about 23% of the population, let's get 23% of the money. We don't get to do that. But every single conversation is around how do we spread these projects throughout the region. There's not going to be something that the region votes on that is only the Portland projects. I expect that every part of the region will get 1 or 2 projects. I don't see a world in which we could get all 6 because, as was pointed out, that would spend all of the money, and that's also not fair. So, seeing that we have 6 projects, I do think it would be smart of us to figure out, do we have, 1 or 2 of them are quite large. We can't get both big ones. Which big one do we want, and how do we complement that big one by 1 or 2 of the smaller ones? Or do we want a bundle of the small ones and then maybe we can get more? But I think we should be trying to figure out which is our step 2 priority, and then what other things can balance that. And then in terms of CTAC staff support, I think that the contextual strengths of our projects is really strong. 2 of them dovetail with Sunrise. So since that's already a major corridor investment up top, I think that narrative feels like something we should ask CTEC to help set. The other one is the Oregon City project. There's already such a massive focus on funding in the area around Willamette Falls. It would make sense to me that we would actually frame the Willamette Falls investment as part of that investment area. And also ask for CTAC to dig through the emergency transportation route study that was done like 6 months ago, because I remember that was right next to a pinch point. And yeah, pedestrian access maybe isn't going to solve your emergency transportation problem, but it's already like on the map as an area where we knew we needed more investment. So I think those are the 2 contextual items that come to mind. Those of you who are from areas, Mayor Buck, let's contextualize your Lake Oswego project. I think that's where we're really going to be able to shine.
That Lakeview could just never gets over the finish line. We just keep putting it out there. Commissioner Savas, and then hopefully too we can get like, so I think Councilor Lewis made really good points, and so if we're gonna talk about this more and dig into it, obviously we're not going to do that this morning because we are out of time, even right now. So could we talk about it next month at this meeting? Is that something we could do? Is that okay? Yeah, Jamie, are you saying yes?
On our current timeline, if C4 Metro would like to make a recommendation to the greater C4 body, that recommendation needs to come next month, and C4 would need to take an action at a June meeting. But I can mirror back what I've heard so far as maybe some tentative direction to CTAC. But Commissioner Savas, why don't I do that after your comment?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to not remind, because we have a lot of new folks here. So with respect to everyone who hasn't been here over the years, that the kind of the sharing, so to speak, or consideration of that we have talked about here has come in many different funding streams. And Mayor Bucky been around probably longer than some of our colleagues here, elected colleagues, like I have. So we have years back, I realize that the criteria seems to always pretty much change, right? It changes. And so to Councilor Pratt's point about the equitable areas and so forth, I mean, that could, definitely, it should be a factor. I'm not going to dispute that, but if we use that solely, or we put so much emphasis on it, then the areas that have a substantial amount of infrastructure and are developed in a certain way, where there's significant assets around and modalities around, they'll just continue to get more and more and more if we only factor just that. And but to me, there ought to be a criteria for areas that are underdeveloped from a transit asset or transportation asset standpoint. And that's where, so to speak, the pun there is, that's where we shine. Clackamas County shines because we have the least amount of assets. But yet let's not forget that we pay a lot, right? And I know that that's proportional as well. So the math is the math. No one can change the math, but just factor in that the criteria constantly changes, and if it changes in a way that doesn't recognize the underdeveloped areas, we will continue to lose, and we will fall farther and farther behind proportionally than what we actually deserve. That's all I'm going to say. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, Jamie.
Okay, mirroring back what I heard in this conversation, C4 Metro is interested in framing up comments for C4 to submit to Metro as official coordinating committee feedback, and there's interest in having CTAC involved. What I heard from this group is there's interest in protecting step 1 dollars as effective budgeting, avoiding pitting local projects against each other, but prioritize projects that are already high scoring in the process. In direction to CTAC, what I heard is interest in CTAC considering strategy. 2 potential strategies could be pursuing one big project paired with smaller projects or bundling smaller projects together. Secondarily, CTAC should consider project context, including projects on emergency transportation routes, projects that leverage larger corridor investments, such as the Oregon City redevelopment area or the Sunrise Corridor, and projects in areas that are relatively undeveloped and need that assistance to start the process. Does that summarize the consensus of the group going forward?
That's great. Yes, I think so. I'm seeing head nods.
Excellent. We will entrust CTAC to do the staff work and then come back to you next month with a staff recommendation.
That's great. I think in the past, I mean, Clackamas, our group here has always succeeded in being unified around projects and doing a good job knowing, our size and coming in with realistic recommendations, not like, oh, here's our $30 million worth of recommendations for a $35 million pot, fund them all. And I know the last round, I felt like we were really successful being on the same page. And it sounds like I'm sure that we can get there again this year too, and pick those projects that are going to make a big difference in the communities on the ground, that we can get over the finish line. So, all right, that sounds great. You know what? I just we got to move on though to the TPAC update. Is Mr. Farley here? Is he going to give it? Morning, Will.
Good morning, getting moved over. Hello, members of C4. I'll giving the TPAC update. I was in attendance at the April 4th meeting. I, however, missed the April 9th meeting. The April 9th, we missed an update on Metro's regional transportation demand management strategies. But for the April 4th meeting, we got our fatal crash update showing that we had 11 traffic deaths in the region in March and the early days of April, 4 of which happened in Clackamas County. We got our safety update, which included a few ODOT projects, including installing some rectangular rapid flash beacons in 3 new locations, providing advisory speeds on I-5 between Ross Island Bridge and Terwilliger, and ODOT investing $23.3 million into Oregon Highway 224 in Milwaukee to include paving efforts, ADA improvements, and a bike ped crossing at Monroe Street. PBOT also had some safety projects. They activated 2 new RRFBs, or rectangular rapid flashing beacons, on 82nd. Portland Police Bureau and their partners provided additional enforcement over the St. Patrick's Day weekend, which had some good traction. Additionally, U.S. Department of Transportation announced a funding opportunity for the latest round of the Safe Streets for All grants. And then Portland State launched a new PED data dashboard to help us estimate pedestrian volumes. Moving on, we got an MTIP amendment that added new ADA upgrades that improves crossings at multiple locations throughout the metro area. It amended an ODOT Public Transportation Division project and then canceled a different ODOT Public Transportation Division project. I'm trying to get my acronym straight. Then we got the Draft Unified Planning Work Program, another acronym I sometimes have trouble with, and we provided a recommendation to JPAC on that one. And then we, much like you received today, we got a Community Connector Transit Study. We got the update of the policy framework. And then moving on to other business, we got the 2027 to 2030 MTIP performance measures approach and methods update, and an update on the Tualatin Valley Transit and Safety Project, which will upgrade TriMet Line 57 on TV Highway between Forest Grove and Beaverton to the FX, or their frequent express line. And with that, I don't know if I missed much else. Jeff can kind of fill in any of the blanks.
Thank you, Will. Jeff's giving the thumbs up. All right, we appreciate the update. Thank you for being here. Okay, Folks, we are gonna move on here. We're got only 20 minutes left in this meeting, so we're gonna make up for lost time. We're gonna move into the impact portion of the agenda, and we have here Jessica and Malou from Metro to talk about Metro's Future Vision Commission. Malou and Jess, good morning.
Thank you, Mayor Buck. We are happy to be here. Are we sharing the slides or do you share them?
We can accommodate either if you have a preference.
Jess, do you have a preference? Do you have them ready to share? Sorry about this.
I have them ready to share.
Okay, well, we'll have Jess go ahead and share them. Thank you, Jamie. And we are really happy to be here today. Thanks for having us. Again, I'm Malou Wilkinson. I'm the Deputy Director of Planning, Development, and Research. And I use she, her pronouns. I'm here with Jess Zadeb. She is our project manager for the Future Vision update. And we're really excited to be here today. We'll try to go quickly. We want to give you an opportunity to just understand the work that we're doing. And also to talk a bit about the Future Vision Commission that is being pulled together by our council to guide this work. Jess, if you can go to the next slide. I want to start just by taking a minute to situate us back to when our region's 50-year Future Vision was actually created. It's a foundational document for our region. It was created in 1995, so that is actually quite a long time ago. It was the year, we've got some pictures here to help you remember what 1995 was like if you were around in 1995. As we have been talking with people, we have some people who were babies, some were in middle school, some were in high school, but if you just think about it, we had Windows 1995, a federal government shutdown was really, really big news at the time, and politicians would laugh over coffee while they're trying to solve that problem. Popular culture was dominated by the O.J. Simpson trial. Everyone listened to the radio. Gangsta's Paradise was a top single. Hootie and the Blowfish had the best-selling album, and Clueless was a movie that had great staying power. In fact, I watched it with my daughter last year. And it had more staying power than the top grossing film of that year, Batman Forever. So I just want us to all to think about how different things were in 1995. Sometimes we've asked everyone to share where you were in 1995. I don't think we have time to do that today, but just think about where you were in 1995 and all of those different perspectives from then to now that we need to take into account as we're doing this work. In Portland, we were a year away from the West Side Max extension. Our entire light rail system at the time consisted of a single blue line from downtown Portland to Gresham. And we are just really trying to take something that was created in 1995, has been our North Star, and move it into today. So Jess, if you can go to the next one. Both a Future Vision document that goes for 50 years and the 2040 growth concept were adopted in 1995. And the Future Vision is about a lot more than land use. The 2040 growth concept is about how we grow, and it's that map that you are all familiar with. It guides our work. In 95, we used maps. They were, created a little bit differently than they are now, but we still continue to really like to look at those maps and think about the future. We, when we were doing engagement in 1995, and I say we, but it wasn't me, one of the ways that we reached a lot of people was by asking Blockbuster to have free VHS tapes that everyone in the region could check out to learn about the Future Vision and how to talk about how they wanted to grow. A lot of what we did has held up pretty well over time. A lot of the growth has happened where we agreed as a region we wanted to have it happen in centers, along corridors, within the original urban growth. But not everything. We obviously, as planners, we never get everything right. Really exciting places that nobody envisioned. Bridgeport Village is one example of that. I'm going to move on to the next slide. So as I think I've really tried to emphasize, these guiding documents, our land use planning has been updated over time. So I'm not saying that everything is completely out of date. I don't but our future vision is almost 30 years old, or is 30 years old now. And while some of our core values remain similar, that are in it are out of step with our current, the current state of the world today. And I also just want to, be clear that our charter by the voters in the region requires us to have a future vision that is, that looks out 50 years. And it also requires us to have a regional framework plan to implement that. So the current vision starts from the sustainability principle of meeting the needs of today without compromising the ability of future generations. It doesn't specifically address climate change. It does not address equity other than kind of regional geographic equity. And it also doesn't address all of the regional responsibilities. We didn't have regional parks in 1995. We definitely did not have a housing department or a way to try to address some of our affordable housing needs around the region. And so we are hoping that working with all of you and people across the region, that our updated vision will reflect how we want to approach issues in a regional way in the future. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jess, who can move her own slides forward.
Thanks, Malou. And I am going to attempt to go quite fast here because I know that we're short on time. So as Malou mentioned, this is a document that's actually required in our charter. These are just a couple of quotes from the charter. This is a long-term and visionary outlook for a 50-year period. It's not where regulation is going to be located. It's not currently, and it won't be in the future. This is really the setup for an implementation plan and eventual actions. It's also the charter that tells us that we need to appoint a commission to be the body that oversees this work. Just real briefly here, the future vision, even here at Metro, is something that most people don't know exists, and that is because basically it's not connected to anything else right now. It hasn't served its original kind of stated purpose of being a guiding document, being a North Star that really flows down to everything else, and that's kind of what we're hoping that document can be, both for Metro and for the region. The intent is not that this is Metro's document for Metro. The intent is that we are convening a process where we are trying to get the region's perspectives on who we want to be in 50 years so that we as Metro and all of our partners around the region can help move forward toward that vision. So as I mentioned, we are going to be updating the future vision. There will be a separate implementation plan that kind of lags the development of the vision, and then those actions will take place after the implementation plan. For instance, we know that we're going to update the growth concept. Our council has started to float the idea of being really excited about figuring out what an investment strategy looks like for the region. How do we fund changes to transit? How do we fund housing? How do we fund parks? Like, looking forward to thinking about what are those major regional conversations we need to have about the dollars and cents of how we move forward toward that 50-year vision. We know that there's a lot else going on in the region that we are going to need to coordinate with, and we don't want to get ahead or behind of any of these, and we're really going to try to do a lot of conversation with partners around the region to make sure that we are in sync as much as we can be. There are also pieces of work going on right now at Metro that we know we need to coordinate with, and so there's going to be just a lot of effort on our part as staff and as an agency to make sure that we are reaching out and having a lot of conversations about how we can sort of have this vision process and document mutually support other work in the region. I mentioned the commission. Membership requirements stated in the charter. We need to have public and private sectors represented, someone from the academic community, and at least one member from outside the quote-unquote metro area, which is what the statement is in the charter. This body is going to be convened just for the period of developing the vision. They're a special kind of one-time convened commission whose charge is to recommend a future vision to council. They've only been convened once before for this effort from about 1993 to 1995. It was a lot of inside baseball at that time. These were folks whose names you probably would recognize if you've been around for a while in this region. Some folks still with us, some unfortunately no longer. But the commission really, their job is to consider all relevant information and public comment. So they're going to be filtering all of the public engagement we get. We as staff and a consultant team are going to do a bunch of research to feed into this effort that they're going to be asked to become conversant in, and they, if they so choose, can also commission more research that they feel like they need to get to a future vision for the region. We are planning to have them meet in person about monthly for about a year and a half. Composition-wise, where we've landed for this iteration of the commission is that there will be 4 elected officials on the body, 1 each from those 4 counties listed at the top, not necessarily from the county scale of government, just 1 person from that particular piece of the region. Additionally, there will be 1 non-voting Metro councilor who will chair this commission, and that's going to be Councilor Gonzalez from District 4. There will also be at least 2 members of this body per council district. We got that guidance from our council so that we're making sure that there's a geographic spread of folks across the region. And in applications, we've asked people to identify, like self-identify what district they would represent. That can be where they live, it can be where they work, but that's what we've asked folks to do. We've also put out the call to our tribal partners to see whether or not there is interest and capacity to participate on the commission in this way. Obviously, we'll be doing other consultation with them as part of this process. And you know, this is going to need to be a body that represents a lot of different interests, a lot of different types of lived experience. So beyond what's there on the screen, we might end up with just a few more folks to kind of round that out for the region. We're hoping that the group is somewhere around 20 to 22 people. And I just want to say, hopefully this is obvious, this is not the only way that people are going to be engaged, that leadership level folks are going to be engaged in this process. This is one particular body. We've gotten a lot of interest, over 100 applications so far. The applications just closed yesterday. And many of those folks who applied were really hoping to engage in other ways throughout this process. Our council's given guidance so far about some possible vision topics. You know, ultimately, these are going to be reviewed and vetted by the commission in their work, but these are kind of the big picture, like forward-thinking, 50 years in the future buckets that council has started to give staff guidance about what they're hoping the commission will take a look at in looking out in 50 years. So as Malou mentioned, it's kind of anything and everything in the region. This will be hopefully an aspirational and exciting document for folks to engage with. Again, what we've been doing is working a bunch with our council to get their guidance on what they're hoping to see from this process, both in terms of outcomes and in terms of the process itself. So I'm not going to read these because they're in your packet, but this is where we're looking to move with the outcomes of the project. In terms of the process, what I mentioned before, you know, we are going to convene the commission, but by far that's not going to be the only way in which we want to talk to folks throughout this project. We have a real strong interest in this being a place where Metro does what it does best in embodying regional coordination and making sure that we are engaging with all parts of the community, whether those are community-based organizations and the particular communities that they represent within our region, or that's the business community, and understanding that they're a super important partner to thinking ahead in this region and understanding that they need to have a core role in moving us forward and thinking beyond where we are today. We've also heard really strong guidance that we need to empower the youth voice in this process. In 50 years, some of us might not be here. Our kids are going to be a lot older than they are now. And we need to make sure that the youth voice in this is thoroughly engaged and really empowered. in terms of coordination, we are going to be, as I said, working closely with MPAC and MTAC. I'm actually presenting at MTAC in about half an hour. MPAC will still have a role in this process. They are, MPAC is not the recommending body to council for the creation of the vision. That is the commission's job. We are still working through exactly what the coordination will look like with MPAC. At this point, we're envisioning that they will play a similar role to what they normally do, which is to advise Metro Council. So it could be the case that when the commission recommends the vision to council, that MPAC is also providing comment on the vision at that time. And obviously that's not, again, the only way in which MPAC would be engaged. We're envisioning that there are regular updates and conversations with that body as well. But again, they will be really a commenting body on the work of the commission. I am going to just leave it at that, acknowledging that we have 5 minutes left in the meeting, and happy to take comments, questions, or have any of you reach out to me or Malou as we get this thing off the ground.
Thank you, Jess. Thank you, Malou. We'll see if anyone has any comments or questions at Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to jet out of this meeting shortly after my comment. I have another commitment to go to. Thank you, Malou, for the presentation. I come from the world of engineering and problem solving, and the way we have been successful is by thinking outside the box and being pretty self-critical. So that's our nature. I would suggest maybe that we look at the composition a little bit deeper. It sounds like it's already made progress, so maybe it's too late. But I think we ought to really be self-critical as how it really worked out and where it's not really what's with the built environment as is today and the trends today compared to what the vision is. I think we need to really include more than one member outside the region. We're not factoring in the commute shed, and you look at the purpose of what the MPO is all about with regard to air quality, and factor in the fact that people are moving farther and farther, and technology is actually solving our air quality issues to some degree. But the patterns of development are not really any different. And the fact that there are so many people who live on the perimeter counties outside the Tri-County region or the 4-county region, that it's very self-evident that we need to think bigger and we need to think outside the box of the MPO in order to be effective. Those are my comments, and thank you all, and I'm going to jet out to my next meeting.
Thanks, Commissioner Savas. Mayor Milch.
Just something I thought you might find interesting. The picture of the Hillsborough or Hillsdale neighborhood in there reminded me that I had a book that includes some of these pictures from way back then, and you probably can't see it. I don't know if it'll even focus, so you really can't. But at one time, part of this vision was that the Clackamas Town Center would be what is now the Clackamas Town Center would be filled in and surrounded by housing and gridded streets and landscaping, a totally different development than what it is now. But it's really interesting to see how this vision started with ideas of furthering density and proximity between amenities and housing as a means of addressing some of those issues that Commissioner Savas was concerned about. We didn't always get there, that's for sure. I'm hoping we'll have more success at getting there on this round of visioning.
That's great. Thanks, Mayor. All right. Anyone else? No? All right. Well, thank you very much. Thanks, Malou and Jess. We'll look forward to staying engaged in this process as it continues to move forward. And then do we have an MTAC update today in our final minute?
Yes, I will briefly promote Jamie Stasny.
Great. Hi, Jamie. Good morning.
Good morning. Coming to you live from Metro. I'm just getting ready to walk into the MTAC meeting. And we are going to hear about a couple topics that you just heard about, the future vision, as well as the connector study And then we'll be hearing a briefing on Montgomery Park, so, and the LPA adoption. So no update on the conversation, just that's where we're heading this morning.
That's great. That's all we needed to hear. Thank you, Jamie. Have a great
Thank
meeting.
you. Thanks, guys. Have a good day.
All right. With that, we are going to end here right on time. Thanks for being here this morning, everyone. We are adjourned. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.